Kind enough to go first because I was still eating when they started. So I'll go ahead and take the lead. Commissioner Doug Underhill, I've been your commissioner for the last 4 years, so I think most people probably already know my bio. I won't waste a lot of time on it. One of the many sheets in front of you is my bio. It's actually the least informative of all the sheets that we put in front of you. The other statements that we have here, these other documents, go into very detailed issue discussions. So I went ahead and gave you all of those so that we could, if you have questions, you can be able to, kind of already see ahead, and you can have questions about where I stand on things, but also that you can take those with you. If you're one of those 50 questions people, don't worry about it. If we run out of time, we will turn the tables so that so Wolf Bay can continue to make money today. We all want that, but I'll stay in the parking lot. My next appointment is, I think, 1:30 downtown, so you've got me until then. If we've got questions out in the parking lot, happy to answer them. So you know that, as you said, I'm still a reserve officer. I received the highest honor in the military, which is command of a unit last year. Took over a unit that had historical problems and had actually 4 alcohol-related instances actively going on in a unit of 37. Now that may, for those of you familiar with the Fleet Navy, that sounds about normal or even pretty good. In cryptology, we don't usually have those kind of things. Since then, we've turned that around. I've taken that unit, and what I had this huge group of what I refer to as silverbacks, guys that have been overseas 4 or 5 years during the global war on terror. And I had a large group of people, almost a fourth, actually more than a fourth of my unit, who were too young to buy a beer. Had never been overseas. And there was a huge gap in the middle. And so we were having a lack of transfer of an understanding. So what I told my young guys is, I said, I want to see everybody volunteer. We changed the paradigm of that unit to a volunteer, forward-leaning, and combat-ready unit to such an extent that we're up to almost 50 now. I have 14 sailors over in the desert right now. Working for me and working for you. So we've changed this thing, and almost all of them, first time over there. So I'm going to tell you this: when you hear people talk about kids these days, and some of you I may have said this last time I was at Rotary because I say it everywhere I go. When you hear somebody with that kids these days commentary, don't buy into that. Kids these days are smarter than we were when we were their age. They are just as hardworking as we were, and they are dedicated, but they do demand a lot more answers up front than we thought we were allowed to, and we're actually a better America for it. So truly, honestly, kids these days are they are the defense and the bulwark of American democracy. America is just as safe now as it was when we were all the ones when it was our turn to stand that watch. So don't let anybody tell you any different. And the same is true here in Escambia County. Over the last, when I came into office 4 years ago, I said that we were going to change things. We were going to be honest and upfront. We were going to focus on the core issues and the core of the district. Perdido Key certainly has a lot of issues and took a lot of press back then over things like beach renourishment and all that kind of thing. But the reality is that for this job, public safety and infrastructure are jobs 1 and 2. They go simultaneous, hand in hand. And by the time we're done with jobs 1 and 2, public safety and infrastructure, there's not enough money and there's not enough time to be focused on anything else. So that has really been the focus of my tenure here. You can see from the documents that I've got in front of you and the discussion that we're going to have is that we've made the incremental wins every single day for the last 4 years. I'm here to ask for your vote for another 4 years of putting the people over the politics that has rendered the fabric of this place, because anytime you talk about Escambia County, you always talk about how awesome the people are. When you're away from here, you miss our culture. It's not that you miss our roads. Sometimes, certainly you miss the beaches a little bit, but the thing you miss the most is who we are as a people here on the west side. We put the people over politics 4 years ago, and it started making a difference. It has made a big difference in Escambia County, and we got another 4 years that we've got a great stack of things that can get done by continuing to do that. Most importantly, what's happening is we are bringing new people into the equation. We are putting communities and neighborhoods in charge of their own destiny, and instead of telling them what to do, we are enabling them to do it themselves. And in doing so, we are building a stronger, more resilient Escambia County. We've got another 4 years of that coming up with a vote for people over politics. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug. All right, my name is Scott Trotter, and I'm obviously running for County Commission. Most of you probably aren't that familiar with me, so I'll go a little more into my background. I'm originally from Wichita, Kansas, but we moved here about 4 years ago after I retired from the Air Force. I spent 21 years in the United States Air Force, traveling around the country and around the world. Normally when you think about Air Force veterans, you think about someone who worked on planes or flew planes or something like that. But I worked in accounting and finance. I was a budget analyst. I did some other things within the finance world. So, working in finance, that is good preparation for this job. I was in Iraq for 7 months while I was there. Me and a team of 2 other airmen completely overhauled how we were accounting for our detainee operations over there. When we took it over, a couple Army infantry guys who didn't have any finance training were doing it, and they couldn't account for any of their money. So within 7 months, we completely reinvented how that operation was working, so we had 100% accountability on everything. When I was deployed to our embassy in Islamabad, Pakistan, it was a similar situation. Me and another Air Force individual were put in charge of accounting for our $1 billion Coalition Support Fund program that was reimbursing Pakistan for their anti-terrorism programs and or their anti-terrorism efforts. And the person before me was a Marine. He was very sharp, but he wasn't a finance person. And he was still accounting for all this money using pencil and paper and a calculator. So again, we had to reinvent the entire process, made it much more efficient, a lot better accountability. So that's what I've always done in the Air Force, trying to find better ways of doing things, make things more accountable. In my last assignment, I was the Chief of Financial Operations at the Air Force's Operation and Testing Evaluation Center in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And that was a very large organization spread out all over the country. In fact, they have a detachment over there in Eglin Air Force Base. And their budget process wasn't unlike what we do here in the county. At the start of the year, all the different divisions and departments would submit a budget request, saying that they would detail all the money, things they need money for, and we would have to look at that. And typically, they were asking for more money than what we actually had. So we'd have to go through. We have to talk to all the individuals working on those budgets. We have to find out what exactly their needs were, and where it could be cut and they could still accomplish their mission. And again, that's very similar to what we have to do in the county every year. So I did that for 21 years. When we started thinking about retiring, we had a big decision. You can move any place in the country and the government will pay for it. So we looked at different places, and I had briefly been in Pensacola early in my career to take a pass out at the Naval Air Station. And I remember really liking this place. And we'd been stationed over in Biloxi for a while, so that's kind of a similar environment. And we'd also been stationed in Florida over on the East Coast down Melbourne at Patrick Air Force Base. And we thought, Florida would be a pretty good place to live out the rest of our years. And I also wanted to get my master's degree in history because I had gotten my bachelor's degree. And really my goal was to teach high school history. So we thought we'd come here. The University of West Florida has a great master's program in history. So the last several years I've been going up there using my GI Bill to get my master's degree. I'm currently 1 credit short, so I haven't quite finished it because I've been busy doing this the last 6 months. Hopefully someday I'll get to finish that. I also did get my teacher's certificate since I've been here, so that was an accomplishment I was pretty happy about. When you're in the Air Force, or in the military in general, you tend to not pay a lot of attention to local politics because you're moving in 3 or 4 years, so you kind of focus more on the national politics. But we're planning on staying here forever. I don't want to move anymore. We bought our forever house down there in Warrington. Spent a lot of time and effort getting it fixed up, and so I started paying attention to what was going on locally, learning who the local officials were, what they did. Learn all about that world I had kind of ignored in the past. And to be honest, I was somewhat concerned with the direction our current commissioner was taking. And I still wasn't planning on running. What I was really interested was who was going to run against them so I could support them. But then it turns out no other Democrat was going to step up and do it. And I took a couple days to think about it, and I realized that I could do it because I have an income from being retired. I'm not currently employed, so I could spend 6-7 months working on this campaign. So I decided someone had to do it, so I was going to step up and run for this office. So that's kind of how I came to be here, why I'm running. Some of the things I think we need to try and focus on Obviously, beach access has been a big issue. It's been in the news a lot recently. We need to increase our public access to the beach in Perdido Key. Traffic on Gulf Beach Highway and Sorrento. We haven't had a very good relationship over the last 4 years with the Department of Transportation here in Florida. I think we need to reset that so we can get some of those improvements on those 2 roads going in the right direction. The basic theme of my campaign is really pretty simple. I'm not looking to radically change everything. I want to make sure that our elected officials have transparency. We need to share information as soon as the commissioner gets it. We need to be basically a conduit of information to the constituency. We need to have honest representation. You need to have faith that when your elected official says something that you can bank on it. That was exciting. But and then we need I got distracted. I don't know what the other thing is. But we need in respect. That was it. There's never going to be agreement on anything. There's going to be people with different opinions. Everybody needs to know that they can go to the commissioner, and even if they disagree with them, even if they're kind of questioning where they're coming from or what their motivations are, they need to know that they're going to be treated with respect. So that's really the 3 main tenors of my campaign, and I would be happy to answer any questions you guys have. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. We appreciate that. I'm going to start out to give you just a minute to rest with Doug. So, anybody got a question for Commissioner Underhill? Raise your hand.
Hey Doug, I was reading your the summary sheet here, and one of my biggest concerns is Gulf Beach Highway Sorrento, and I realize that FDOT has not been playing nicely in the sandbox and everything. Where exactly do we stand in that process now?
That's a great question, because I do want to speak to the idea that we don't have a great relationship with FDOT and we need to reset that relationship. My opponent is right 4 years ago. That is absolutely the case. Historically, Escambia County has always played a shell game with our money, and we would promise FDOT, hey, we're going to spend, we've got $15 million local lift for this responsibility, and we've got $10 million for this, and we've got $3 million for that, and we just promised everything. And then when it was time for us to actually deliver the money, we just figured, well, we'll just kind of figure out where to come up with. That is why Sorrento Road did not get 4-lane. 6 months after taking office, they came in and said that, they said, okay, we're ready for your local lift. We need $17 million to get Sorrento Road 4-lane, as you promised that you would do in the agreement, and we simply did not have the money. Now, Jack Brown and I, with the county administrator, we did everything we could to try to find that money. Simply wasn't there. Once I realized what was going on, I went to Chipley myself. I didn't send staff, I didn't send somebody else over. I went over in what I call my walk of shame, because I got my rear end handed to me in no uncertain terms. And they basically took out on me this enormous amount of frustration they had over the way we had historically done business. And I took every bit of that punch. Let them have it, let me have it, let me have it. And at the end of the day, thinking maybe if I just take the punches really hard, then maybe at the end of the day I'll be able to be a smooth talking guy and I'll be able to get us back on track. Didn't happen. That was not going to happen. But what did happen is that we got, the walkaway was that we got intersection improvements that are going in at Bower and Sorrento and at Sorrento and Gulf Beach Highway that are going to alleviate quite a bit of that problem. If you've noticed, if anybody's trying to turn left onto Gulf Beach Highway off at Sorrento, that one person that wants to turn left jams up the traffic all the way back. It's not going to be a 100% solution. Anybody who tells you they've got one is probably selling something he can't deliver. We have improved and we have completely flipped that paradigm that we've had with FDOT, and it's actually a much improved and working system. Gulf Beach Highway, not old Gulf Beach Highway, the residential part, but Gulf Beach Highway, which is between Navy Boulevard and Sorrento. This went from a level of service C to a level of service F the day that NAS had to close the front gate to tourism traffic. That made it our #1 priority in District 2 for road improvements. So that is now, that's under PD&E right now. There are 4 phases in building and getting from idea to road, PD&E being the first one. That is almost finished. That's going to be a 4-lane and what's called an urban profile, meaning it's going to have sidewalks, it's going to have storm gutters, so it'll be no ditches, but underground storm water management and pedestrian scaled street lighting. That is our number one priority. The number two priority should be Sorrento Road, but the reality is that it is not. It's Blue Angel Parkway, the next sector of Blue Angel Parkway. On July 10th, FDOT came out and they had their town hall meeting in which they rolled out the plan and the PD&E results for Gulf Beach Highway from Walmart up to 98. That is moving forward. It's under construction. The reason it's moving forward is because I made the decision and pushed and got the approval to put it on the strategic intermodal system. That is the, besides being the tourism gate, it's also the material gate for trucks. Under that premise, it got put on the strategic intermodal system and therefore freed up other available federal dollars to advance that project, and that's why it's happening faster. The next one is Sorrento Road. And Sorrento Road, we are behind the curve on for the reasons that I've already stated. Sorrento Road, we're going to go ahead and get those two intersection improvements done. The first one of those should start this winter. And once those are done, that's going to give us the opportunity to reevaluate how much we're going to be able to get done in terms of a 4-lane. Whole lot to talk about. Short question, really long answer, but I think Rod standing up is kind of like that ding ding. So I'll go ahead and does that answer your question? Yeah, thank you. There's a lot more to it. Happy to do it in the parking lot.
Let me give Scott. Scott, do you want to respond to that?
Just very briefly, under the previous Commissioner Gene Valentino, a lot of time and effort had gone into 4-lane Perdido Key Drive, and we wanted to go in a different direction, so that's fine. But instead of just unilaterally canceling that entire project, I think maybe a better way of handling that would have been to go to the state and say, we want to maybe redirect our efforts to Gulf Beach Highway and Sorrento instead of just canceling the project. So I think it's really a matter of approach that we want to work with different agencies to find better ways of doing things rather than just acting quickly and severing all those relationships. That's all I got.
Thanks, Scott. All right, next question will be for Scott. Pat?
Well, this is I don't think Scott probably aware of this, or maybe Commissioner Underhill either, but as a point of objection, speaking on behalf of the Citizens Advisory Committee, which I'm a member of, not as an independent business right now, one of the things that I think should be brought up is this study for Sorrento Drive, expanded, it was a little expanded and wasn't, is that once it gets to our 1974 bridge, which has been rated now 53.2 on a scale of 1 to 100, which means when it hits 50, they got to replace it.
Close.
By the time that happens, it seems to me we're putting the cart before the horse, because we're going to have 4 lanes going to a 2-lane bridge. Not to mention the fact that our pedestrian bicycle friendly Perdido Key driveway, you're not going to be able to get over there if you're like me, a fat guy on a bicycle trying to get across that little bridge. Okay. And my point is, I think both of y'all should be aware of the fact that I think that really there's a safety study going on right now at the state for that bridge. They may think that hey, this may cost $2 or $3 million bucks, maybe well spent to save one life temporarily, but then we may have to look at that bridge. That's my only point, and I don't care if you want to address that or not, but I wanted to bring that up for both candidates here, because I've been a proponent of that for years, and that's been out here for
sort of an
30 years now.
Addendum to that, because that's really just a general comment, but addendum to that is I used to work for the county, and at the time I worked for the county after Ivan, the commitment was to have an 4-lane evacuation route all the way Sorrento, Blue Angel, connect up, everybody with the interstate. That was high priority. I don't know what happened to that, but that was the priority, is the evacuation route, because can't get out of here. There's no way to get out. So probably leave that one alone, but just wanted to add that to it. Let's start with a new question for Scott. Anybody got a question for Scott? Let's go Amy, and then I'll come back to you.
Scott, thank you, and Commissioner Underhill, for being here today. We really do appreciate your presence. And my question is, you had mentioned that there were things that you don't like about what has been going on the last 4 years. If you could pick 2 things that specifically, not just in general, but specifically that you would like to address, I would like to know what your 2 core missions are. I believe Commissioner Underhill had mentioned, or I think it's written in here, that his 2 priorities are. So I'd just be interested to find out what your two priorities are.
Did everybody hear that question? Okay, she's in a nutshell, she's asking the candidate, Mr. Trotter, I'm sorry, Trotter, Scott Trotter, to inform us of what his two top priorities would be if he is elected to be county commissioner.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, well, we've already talked about doing improvements to Gulf Beach Highway and Sorrento. I think that's clearly a top priority. And, generally, I think we need to put more of our county's resources for infrastructure into the poor areas of this district. Brownsville, Mayfair, Warrington. I think a lot of those areas have really been ignored for a long time. There's a lot of people in those districts that don't vote. It's easy to ignore them and get away with it. I love Perdido Key, and I'm not going to ignore. I'll be out here all the time talking to you guys. But I think we really need to focus on improvements in safety, in traffic infrastructure, in places like Brownsville, Mayfair, Warrington, Myrtle Grove. So that's really going to be my focus. And again, I'm not going to ignore Perdido Key, but we just need to, I think, maybe reprioritize. Clearly, Doug Underhill has, Perdido Key is very near and dear to his heart. It's been at the top of his priorities. I don't want to ignore it out here, but also I think we need a little more attention to other parts of the district. All right, that would be my two.
Would you like to comment on that?
Well, I would absolutely concur that taking care of those areas, the least fortunate areas of our community, is a critical part of our infrastructure issues. That's why there's a new bridge going in on Old Corey Field Road. That's why there's a new community center in Brownsville. That's why Warrington and the flood management issues in the Warrington Basin have been top priorities as well. See, there really isn't, District 2, there isn't, it's not Warrington versus Perdido, and these ideas about I'm going to focus on this area or that area. I don't do business that way. We are all Escambians and we are all in this together, and quite frankly, we are going to be judged in our final days by how well we took care of those areas that needed our help. If we want to raise and elevate Escambia County, we are not going to do it by pulling it up from the top, but by pushing it up from the bottom. Rotarians know that. That's why you're in an organization where you spend your available time, money, and your treasure on helping those who need help. We've done exactly that in Escambia County in our infrastructure issues in those neighborhoods. And if you worry about crime out here, and if you want to decrease crime in Escambia County, so taking it back to the public safety aspect, the way that you do that is you make sure there are opportunities for, and you incentivize desired behavior of our young people getting into lives of prosperity instead of lives of crime.
Okay. Next question, this will go back to Doug. Next question, Mike.
The budget has just been finalized, and my question concerns the millions of dollars that are going to outside agencies like Florida West, for example. And I guess my question would, in understanding that the next budget is forecast after the general election to be even tighter, I guess my question is, number one, what is your perspective on that? And also, are you in favor of the county policy of using tax money to pay companies or employees that are hired in this county? We spend millions now doing that. And I just wonder if you thought that was a good expenditure of tax money.
Well, clearly, no, that is not a good expenditure of tax money, but that's the answer for just about everything that we're doing with your tax dollars. It is bizarre to me that we fought for months, mostly on the pages of Pensacola News Journal, about funding the sheriff's budget. And the sheriff was asking for a budget $9 million increase over 4 years to be able to just fix a pay parity issue and keep trained deputies on the street. It wasn't a huge ask. I was the only commissioner that supported Sheriff Morgan's budget request to make sure that the people who protect us in our time of need are actually paid properly and that they're not trying to figure out how they're going to pay their next mortgage payment. I'm the only commissioner that backed that. However, when the budget for Florida West came up, there was no discussion about it whatsoever. My peers refused to even have a discussion. And it passed 4-1, with me being the only commissioner not supporting continuing this idea. And I'm going to tell you right now, guys, this is Republican welfare. The difference between Republican and Democrat welfare is there's a lot more zeros on the end of the Republican welfare, and it's got to stop. We are not in the business of creating jobs, and any politician who tells you he can create jobs does not understand how jobs are created. Our job is to create an environment in which the private sector can create jobs, and the way that we do that is that we make an infrastructure that works, then we make a place that is safe for the public. We have septic tanks in most of the commercial core of Warrington and Brownsville. Don't ask yourself why there's no growth there. Many of you are business people. You can't run a restaurant on a septic tank very well. You know that you're going to have problems with that. You cannot expect growth where the infrastructure does not promote it. All of our money needs to be focused on those things. We have the budget that we just passed. Politicians are calling it a balanced budget. We took $3.2 million out of the savings account, the emergency trust fund, the fund that's supposed to take care of us when the storms hit and our tax revenue drops precipitously. We took $3.2 million out of the savings account to balance the budget and then called it a balanced budget. If you have to take money out of your savings account to pay your mortgage or keep the lights on, you do not have a balanced budget. You have an unsustainable pattern of behavior. This fall, the doubling of the homestead exemption is almost certainly going to pass. That's going to put a $6 to $7 million hole in our budget. The $9 million that we approved with the sheriff, that's a $9 million hole in the budget that goes to a $14 million hole by the time you deal with all of the other collective bargaining units that are now free to negotiate and renegotiate their contracts. Okay. We lost the legal case with regard to taxing on Pensacola Beach. Had to give $4.5 million back. That's $4.5 million a year that will not be coming to the county. And yet we continue to spend as though we have the money to say yes to everybody. We do not have the money to say yes to everybody, and therefore we need to focus on yes to public safety, yes to infrastructure, and no to everything else. Let the private sector do it, because the private sector is so much better at creating jobs than we ever thought about being.
All right. Concerning the recent budget and those meetings, there was a phrase that was heard a lot if you were watching those meetings. The major passes 4-1 with Commissioner Underhill in dissent. That was said over and over and over again. Now, if you're the one in a 4-1 vote, that's fine. You know, having a principal objection to something. I may be in that position at some point myself. But when it's over and over again, is that effective leadership? You know, basically he was taken out of the process. We need a commissioner that can articulate our budget concerns, where we need to cut our budget, and win a majority. Just 4-1, 4-1, 4-1, time and time and again isn't accomplishing anything. That's just grandstanding. So we need someone who can actually effectively argue for a responsible budget, and that hasn't been happening. As far as the government's role in economic development, we do have a role. He's right. The government doesn't create jobs. But we do create the environment for jobs. We're competing with other counties, other cities around the country for the businesses that are looking to expand. So we do need to be out there in it. I'm generally supportive of Florida West. I do want to, if I get elected, one of my top priorities is going to be to carefully look at their budget, see how they are spending that money. It might be that they're not spending it effectively. I can't really say that for certain, just as a regular citizen. I have to actually get in there, talk to staff, talk to them, and see how they're actually spending that money. But we do need to be attracting jobs to the area. Creating jobs, or an environment where jobs are created, that will be a top priority of mine. Thank you.
I had another question I was going to ask, but because we're on budget, I'm going to go ahead and ask this budget question. I'm going to ask it to both of the candidates, because both of them need to answer it, and that is, what is the largest budget that you have managed in your entire life? And how many of the large budgets have you managed?
I guess that's my question, and you can respond. I talked a little bit in my opening that when I was in Pakistan, working at the embassy over there, me and one other Air Force senior NCO were tracking a $1.5 billion budget. And that was reimbursing the Pakistan's military for all their military operations, fighting terrorism up in the tribal areas up in the north, west part of the country. A lot of times they don't get the credit that they deserve, because Pakistan did a lot fighting the Taliban and fighting Al-Qaeda. Now, that's just one large budget. That's probably by far the largest budget. But, you know, I've worked with a number of budgets, you know, in the tens or even in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And you have to be able to track that budget very, you know, transparently and accurately. You have to know exactly where you are. You have to make sure the money's being spent legally. You have to make sure that you're not overspending, so at the end of the year, you're out of money. So again, I have a lot of experience managing large, complex government budgets.
Thanks. The largest budget that I've managed is the current budget that we have, and I'm very proud of those 4-1 votes, because no matter what everybody else around me says, I will be a fiscal conservative even when it makes me the least popular person in the room. Those 4-1 votes will switch to 5-0 votes when the money runs out and we all have to say no. Yeah, keep in mind, Lumen May was a 4-1 vote saying not to take over the jail from the sheriff. Turns out to be the most brilliant vote the man ever took. So the 4-1 vote that I'm taking now will turn into a 5-0 vote. Count on it. Okay? Somebody has to be the first one to step up and say this has to stop. This is the largest budget that I've ever managed. There's a big difference between managing and auditing or managing and analyzing. The work that I did in the government when I was on active duty was as a counterterrorism officer and then later as a cybersecurity officer. You know, what I managed and what I led was the mission, not just the money aspect of it, but making sure that all of those resources are in place so that the men and women who actually do those jobs can do those jobs and come back home safe. Auditing and analyzing somebody else's budget is a very, very different thing than managing that budget where you actually have to make the decisions. And you're having to make a decision in which you tell one person no and another person yes, where you say this is a higher priority than that. So Escambia County's budget is by far the largest budget that I have ever managed. And I think that we have done, well, you know, certainly during my time as the chairman, we did a zero-based review. Cut 80 positions, or cut I think 18 positions and saved $80,000. Not nearly as effective or complete as it should have been, but that's the kind of thing that we need to be doing when you manage a budget. Managing the budget means making those hard decisions. We did that while I was the chairman. We didn't do such a good job of that this year.
Okay, so something off the budget, some new line of questioning. The next one, I guess we'll go back to Scott. Yes.
I'd actually, I'd like to ask a question that follows up on Commissioner Underhill bringing up the sheriff's budget process. I'd really love to urge everyone in the room to actually read the shade transcripts that are available from those budget meetings rather than taking Commissioner Underhill's word for what happened in those meetings. Everyone has access to those transcripts. They're legally transcribed. Go in, read them, and see what really happened. Now, my question for Commissioner Underhill is, why were you the only commissioner who supported a tax hike on the people for the sheriff's budget? The only one. Why did you make that decision?
Well, first of all, nice hit piece, Mel. Always count on that. Absolutely, go and look and see what I said in private. What you're going to find is what I say in private is exactly what I say in public. There is nothing that I write down in this job that I don't anticipate seeing on a billboard. There is nothing that I say here or in any other audience that I don't expect to see on YouTube. And the beauty of that is that what I say in Perdido Key is going to be the same thing that I say in Brownsville. And you can count on that. You can absolutely take that to the bank. It may not be what you want to hear, but it will be the truth. Why did I support a tax hike on to pay for the sheriff's budget? If there is no other way, if I cannot get my peers to actually cut out things that they think are low priorities, that does not change the fact that Escambia County is not as safe as it needs to be. Okay? Sheriff Morgan made it very clear during that time and very public that we have a public safety MSBU. We have a tax that you pay, a specific tax shows up on your tax bill for the sheriff's office, but that's not his entire budget. My recommendation was let's take the entire cost of public safety and put it on that tax so that the citizens know what it costs to get it done. Then the elected officials, the constitutional officer who is responsible for public safety in this county, can make that argument with you every 4 years when he runs for office. I still think that's the appropriate thing to do. The reason that we're not doing it, I think, is because historically the commissioners have enjoyed some level of power over the sheriff. The sheriff's job is codified in the Constitution of this state. He is a constitutional officer. The Board of County Commissioners should be taking no effort to try to tell him how to do his job, but we seem to want to make a hobby of that in this county. How well the sheriff does his job is between you and the sheriff, and it is something that he should have to run on that record and on his budget every 4 years. We made some huge mistakes that came down to nothing more than an ego battle because people wanted to try to minimize the sheriff. The greatest of those sins was taking over the jail from a man who knew how to run it because we said we could do it cheaper. In the end, we ended up not executing our emergency action plans. The jail ends up blowing up, causing the single largest capital improvement project that this county's ever executed, trying to rebuild that jail. And in the process, we injured and killed people by bad decision making that started with bad egos. So yes, by all means, go back and look at those discussions. They were very, very detailed. It was 5 men who have an obligation to make hard decisions, having the hard discussions. And quite frankly, I liked those discussions more than the ones with the TV running, because we actually had some very hard discussions in there. The beauty of that is that for the first time in Escambia County, when you see us arguing on the dais, when you see us arguing in public, it means we're not working it out behind closed doors. Thanks.
Scott, you want to?
Just very briefly, I don't really need to address all that, but I just want to state that obviously public safety is a top concern of any candidate, and I'll fully support making sure that the sheriff's office is fully funded and that we're promoting security throughout the district.
Okay, next question. This is
For Scott, a question, and I know Commissioner Underhill stands on this. What do you feel about the FDOT Perdido Key Beach or Perdido Key Drive land swap, where the county would take over the Perdido Key Drive and swapping out the property in, I guess, the Beulah and up in Beulah?
All right, I have a lot of concerns on it. My understanding is the project's on hold. I think the ideal situation, and I've heard Jeff Bergosh already argue this before, that the exchange up there in Beulah should be a state road, but they should both be state roads. I have a lot of concerns on downgrading Perdido Key Drive to a county road. Obviously, if there's a hurricane, in theory that could be replaced using FEMA funds, but I don't have a lot of confidence in that process, that it would happen as quickly. You have to question why a commissioner would want to downgrade a road in their own district for the benefit of another district. The ideal situation is both roads become state roads, and I think that's probably likely. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing that happen.
It is absolutely not a downgrade to take control over your own destiny. The government that governs closest to the people governs best. So to call it a downgrade is absolutely absurd. To have concerns about how FEMA works can very easily be resolved by simply reading the emergency action plans and how these things work. If in fact it's a downgrade to be a local road, then that would mean that Via de Luna out on Pensacola Beach is somehow downgraded from Perdido Key Drive. Do you honestly believe that a storm that topped over both of those islands would have Perdido Key Drive being fixed faster under state rules and state procurement than Via de Luna under local procurement? Folks, the way emergency action plans work is that once it is a declared event, and it would have to be a declared event to be so big as to top over one of the islands and destroy a road, then we go into an emergency action plan spending, which is that we spend from that from our safety, our budget that we continue to chew into, but we spend from that and we immediately put contractors to work, and then we are reimbursed by FEMA. Okay? That's how that works. Now think about it. A storm so great that it tops over one of those two islands is going to have FDOT and Chipley fairly busy, not just in Escambia County, but in all of our adjacent counties as well. So they're going to be fairly busy, and we are going to have to be racked and stacked with all of their other priorities. But if it's a county road, we can immediately put our contractors to work on it and pay them out of the FEMA funds. That's how the system works. If you read the system and understand the system, you have absolutely no fear over the emergency aspect. Now, to contextualize this as one commissioner doing something for another district at the risk of his own is just not true. Because when I came into office, one of the things I promised you was we were going to implement the Perdido Key Master Plan. We implemented the Perdido Key Master Plan. A 5-0 vote, not a 4-1 vote, a 5-0 vote to implement the Perdido Key Master Plan. Everybody probably remembers that, the arguments that led up to that, and the issues that were involved with that. The Perdido Key Master Plan calls for things like lowering the speed limit, calls for pedestrian safety, like crosswalks that have the flashing red lights that stop traffic, not those silly things, amber lights in the sunshine, guys, really? Okay. The ones we designed were the red lights that stop traffic. FDOT came back and said under the FDOT's design standards, you can't have that. And so we got what we've got. It's better than what we had, proud of what we've got, but I want better. And so do the people of Perdido Key. We can lower the speed limit. We can increase the walkability and bikeability of Perdido Key Drive by making it a county road instead of a state road. The Floribama is in the process. There's a lot of work that's going to go on at the Floribama this winter, and you're going to be very impressed, I think, with how it moves the flow of traffic. Be careful about expectation management. It's not going to solve everything. It's still 10 pounds of Floribama in a 5-pound sack. So that was for you. So it is always going to be a little bit of a traffic jam there, but it's going to be, a lot of it's going to be resolved with these issues that we're working on with the Floribama Master Plan. Again, that partnership and working together thing that people keep talking about, that's what we've been doing. And it's taken us a long time to get there. We would have gotten there a lot faster if we were not bound by the FDOT rules. We had ALDOT in the bag, we were ready to go. We had both counties and the bar all on the same sheet of music, and it was FDOT's regulations and systems and processes that have slowed it down as much as it has. So as a county road, we get what we want faster. People want to have a traffic light at Johnson Beach. It's very unsafe right there, coming up trying to pull out of there on that NASCAR curve. We can't have it. FDOT won't give it to us. If it's a county road, we could have it in about 90 days. So my motivation for the road swap, and the road swap is not on hold, it's still moving along very nicely out in Chipley. My motivation for the road swap is because it's what's best for Perdido Key. In the process, it's also what's best for Beulah, because we're not going to get that project off the launch pad up there, which gets worse and worse every year. We're not going to get it off the launch pad until we change the way we do business, and we send Tallahassee a very strong message that we are committed locally with our deeds and with our dollars to solving that problem. Only then will FDOT actually help us and move that project forward. So the road swap, still stand by it as the best way for us to implement the Perdido Key Master Plan, while also helping our neighbors to the north solve some problems that have been long overdue in getting solved.
The official meeting's over, so any members who need to leave